This is the story of what comes after
Yes.
everything is made right. In the early days, when the earth was first formed and the heavens stretched wide above it, everything was made with beauty and order. The skies shone with light, the land brought forth life, and peace rested over all creation. But as time passed, sorrow entered the world. Nations rose and fell, hearts grew troubled, and the earth itself seemed to carry the weight of human struggle. Yet even in those days, God did not leave his people without hope. Among the people, there lived prophets, men chosen to speak words that were not their own. One of them was Isaiah, who lived in a time when kingdoms were uncertain and the future seemed unclear. Still, his voice carried a message that reached far beyond his own generation. He spoke of a promise, not a small promise meant only for a single moment, but one that stretched into the distant future. Isaiah described a time when the world itself would be made new again. He said that the former troubles would fade, and something greater would take their place. The deserts would bloom, and joy would replace sorrow. People would build and not lose what they had made. Peace would rest over the land in a way that had not been seen since the beginning. These words were not easy to understand at the time. The people who heard them were living through hardship. Cities had been destroyed and many felt lost. Yet the promise remained like a quiet light in the distance. Years passed, and generations came and went. The message of renewal did not disappear. Instead, it was carried forward, remembered, and spoken again. Much later, another servant of God, named John the Apostle, was given a vision unlike any other. He was far from the busy cities on an island surrounded by the sea. There, in a place of quiet isolation, he saw something that would bring the ancient promises into clear view. He wrote down what he saw in what is now known as the Book of Revelation. In his vision, the old world, filled with pain and brokenness, began to pass away. In its place, a new heaven and a new earth appeared. This was not simply a repaired world, but a completely renewed one. In that new creation, there was no more suffering. Tears were no longer needed, for sorrow had been removed. Death itself, which had long been a shadow over humanity, was gone. John described a holy city coming down from heaven, prepared like a bride. It was a place of beauty, peace, and closeness with God. There, people would no longer feel distant or alone. God would dwell with them, and they would live in his presence. The promise that Isaiah had spoken generations before was now seen more clearly. What had once been a distant hope became a vivid picture of what was to come. For those who listened to these words, whether in ancient times or now, the message carried deep meaning. The story of the world does not end in chaos or darkness, though there are moments of struggle, and though the earth has known sorrow. These are not the final chapter. Instead, there is a future where all things are made right. The promise of a new heaven and a new earth stands as a reminder that God's work is not finished. Just as the first creation was made with care, the new creation will be formed with even greater glory. And so, through the voices of the prophets and the visions given to the faithful, a quiet but powerful truth has been passed down through time. The story is not over. It is moving toward renewal. In the long story of the earth, there came a time when the weight of the old world could no longer remain. For generations, people had lived under the same sky, walked the same lands, and carried the same struggles. Kingdoms had risen with strength and confidence, only to fade like shadows in the evening. Cities once filled with laughter had grown quiet, and the works of human hands slowly lost their place in time. The world, though still beautiful in many ways, carried signs of wear. The ground had known hardship, and the hearts of people often reflected the same burden. There were moments of kindness and light, yet they were mixed with sorrow, confusion, and a deep longing for something better. Still, the promise of renewal had never been forgotten. Those who held on to that promise spoke of a future beyond what their eyes could see. They believed that the present world, with all its struggles, was not the final chapter. As time moved forward, small signs began to appear, not sudden or overwhelming, but steady and certain. The old ways of the world, once so strong and unshakable, began to lose their hold. The things people had trusted in power, wealth, and human strength were revealed to be temporary. Even the greatest structures, built with care and pride, could not last forever. It was not a sudden ending, but a slow and certain passing. Like the fading of night before the coming of dawn, the old world began to give way. The struggles that had shaped generations reached their end. The patterns of hardship, repeated again and again through history, were no longer meant to continue. The world itself seemed to grow quieter, as if preparing for change. What once felt permanent now appeared fragile. The restless movements of life began to settle, and the deep tension that had long been part of the earth started to lift. This passing was not a moment of fear, but one of purpose. It marked the end of all that had weighed heavily on creation. Every burden, every injustice, and every hidden sorrow reached its final point. The old order, with all its limits, had fulfilled its time. For those who had waited in hope, this was the turning point. The world they had known, with its mixture of beauty and brokenness, was not being taken away without meaning. It was being set aside so that something new could take its place. Just as a seed must give way for new life to grow, the old creation was making room for renewal. What had come before was not wasted. It had led to this very moment. There was a deep sense of transition, not filled with chaos, but guided with quiet care. The same hand that had formed the world in the beginning was now bringing it forward into something greater. People who witnessed this change did not feel abandoned. Instead, they began to understand that history had always been moving toward this moment. What once seemed unclear now became simple and certain. The fading of the old world also brought clarity. Things that once seemed important were seen for what they truly were, temporary and passing. What remained was what had always mattered most: truth, faithfulness, and the presence of God. As the old order slipped away, it did not take hope with it. Instead, hope grew stronger. It was like standing at the edge of a long journey and finally seeing the path ahead open. The air itself felt different, filled with quiet anticipation. The waiting of generations was coming to its fulfillment. No longer would the world be defined by its struggles. No longer would the same patterns repeat without end. The passing of the old marked the closing of one chapter, but not the end of the story. Rather, it was the beginning of something that had been promised from the very start. Out of the stillness that followed the passing of the old world, something new began to appear. The emptiness left behind was not meant to remain empty. It was the beginning of something greater. At first, it was like the gentle rising of light after a long night. The darkness did not struggle or resist, it simply gave way. Then, slowly and clearly, a new heaven and a new earth were revealed. This new creation did not carry the marks of the past. There were no signs of wear, no traces of what had once been broken. Everything stood fresh and complete, as if it had just been formed in perfect care. The sky stretched wide above, clearer than it had ever been before. Its light was steady and calm, filling every place without shadow. It did not fade or shift, but remained constant, bringing a sense of peace that reached deep within. The land below was full of life, yet untouched by struggle. It did not resist or grow tired. It simply existed in fullness. Fields and hills spread out in quiet beauty, and every part of the earth seemed to belong exactly where it was. Those who stood within this new world felt the difference immediately. It was not only what they saw, but what they felt within themselves. The weight that had once followed every step was gone. In its place was a deep and steady peace that did not change. Breathing itself felt different. The air was clear and light, filling the body with ease. There was no tension, no hidden fear, only a quiet assurance that everything was as it should be. Movement was no longer driven by need or pressure. Each step, each moment carried its own fullness. Time no longer seemed like something slipping away, but something gently unfolding without loss. The sounds of this new creation were soft and harmonious. There was no noise of conflict, no restless movement. Every sound seemed to belong, fitting naturally into the calm that surrounded everything. Water flowed in quiet streams, clear and steady. It did not rush or overflow, but moved with purpose and peace. The ground received it without strain, and life grew without effort. Trees stood strong and full, their branches reaching outward with ease. They did not struggle to grow or wither with time. They simply remained, full and complete, offering what they had without loss. Nothing in this world felt uncertain. There was no need to question, no searching for stability. Everything held together in a way that could not be shaken. Even the space between heaven and earth felt changed. There was no distance, no sense of separation. What had once felt far away was now near, filling every part of this new creation with quiet presence. Those who walked in this world understood without needing to be told. This was not a return to the past, but the beginning of something entirely new. What had been promised was now real, and it was greater than anything that had been known before. There was no memory of fear guiding their thoughts, no shadow of the past shaping their steps. The old patterns had ended completely, and nothing remained to pull them back. Instead, there was clarity. Each person knew where they stood, and each moment carried meaning. There was no confusion, no uncertainty, only a steady awareness of belonging. This new heaven and new earth were not simply places. They were the fullness of life as it was always meant to be. Nothing was missing, nothing was out of place. And yet, even in its perfection, this beginning did not feel distant or unreachable. It felt welcoming, as if it had been prepared with care for those who would live within it. The stillness that once marked the end of the old world was now filled with life. Not a restless life, but one that moved in quiet harmony.
Want free Domino's slice sauce? Just order any handmade pan or Parmesan stuffed crust pizza.
Shell Rotilla Super Rigs 2026. Register your rig today.
The beauty about having a great team is it gives me the bandwidth to just focus on where I want to be, which is one of the best players in the world.
Yeah.
As the new heaven
Stay
and the
blessed.
new earth continued to unfold in quiet beauty, there came a moment when something even more remarkable began.